There's much talk at the moment about vaccine passports. This is the idea that, if you've been vaccinated, then we'll give you some kind of a passport. Maybe it's a phone app of some kind or some card or document which allows you to have access to certain places in society like restaurants or coffee shops or going to football matches, places like that, fundamental elements of society about which we take for granted and which we consider norm would only be available to people who have one of these vaccination passports. The idea is that if you don't have a vaccination passport, then you're considered possibly a risk of some kind, and that you might be endangering the lives of other people by moving around into these public places, and because you haven't been vaccinated. It's clearly an area which the government itself is considering at the moment. It's an area which I would say is a dangerous road to go down, and one which is something we've never done like this in the past. And it's one which I am wholly and fundamentally against this idea. The argument is, of course, that if people voluntarily decide not to be vaccinated, well, that's up to them. There may well be certain consequences for that. The idea that there should not be discrimination on the basis of your skin colour or your race or your sex or whatever is perfectly understood. But this is not a matter like that. This is a matter of choice and decision. This is where you can make your own mind up if you want to be vaccinated or not, and your choice is such that it may affect other people. And therefore society has the right to keep you at arm's length if you make the wrong choice. It has perfectly right to discriminate against you or allow discrimination against you because you've chosen to act in a certain way. You could choose to act in a different way. You could choose to be vaccinated, in which case society would open up all its doors for you and you would be allowed free entry. I have to say that I find such arguments completely unconvincing and fundamentally wrong and in error. The reason for that is many-fold. I'll try and touch on just some of them here. But the first is that, number one, it cavalierly discriminates and divides society into two groups: those who have access and those who don't have access. It separates your society down the middle. There are those who are willing to be vaccinated and those who won't, and there are those now who have access to cafes, restaurants, shops, and even in some cases to jobs, because there is talk of no jab, no job. And you can be therefore completely marginalised in society. Maybe you won't be allowed to travel on public transport. Maybe you won't be allowed to travel on a train. Maybe you won't be allowed to travel on an aeroplane. You won't be allowed into a sports venue. You won't be allowed into shops to buy things. You won't be allowed into banks to allow you to exchange money. If you get cut off from society in such a way as this, then let's say that's completely punitive, because, well, you probably couldn't function in life properly without access to shops and banks and travel and transport. It's a kind of draconian exclusion. It's a kind of internal exile where you're not allowed to take part or even to be a citizen of any kind. I suppose the fundamental objection to that is that these are rights which one has always considered to be inalienable rights. Rights that you have to go about your business, to do things, to engage in commerce, to sit down in a cafe, to go to a football match. These freedoms have always been considered to be inalienable. that they are yours by right of being a citizen, by right of being simply a human being, and that you carry these rights as of right, and that no one can take those rights away from you. But in this situation, we're looking at a reversal of that picture. We're looking at the idea that those rights are not yours anymore. They never have been yours. They're only conferred to you as privileges which the state can give you or the state can take away from you at any time it likes. And that you don't have any rights to do whatever you want to do in a free society, as we might have thought. But rather, those rights are bestowed by a benign and kindly state who will look upon you in a fortunate and a kind and good way, provided that you do the things that the state wants you to do. We've never had that kind of a situation in this country. It's never been our tradition to treat rights in such a cavalier way and to deny people the human dignity and integrity that goes with making your own choices and making your own decisions on things. And for the state to abrogate those rights and cancel them is a step too far. It's a step of an authoritarian government. It's also something which I would say is undesirable from many other points of view. It's a coercive way of behaving. It's a way in which you would expect a state to say to you, oh, you're entirely free to have a vaccine or very not. But if you don't, then we will ensure that you can't do any of these things. You can't move around, you can't leave your house, you can't go to a shop, you can't exchange goods, you can't have a job, you can't afford to have an income, you can't afford to live in a house anymore, you'll be out on the street. Those are the consequences of people who make a choice, their own free choice. You can make that choice if you like, says the state, but these are the consequences. And really that's no more than coercion. It's a form of aggression against people who choose the wrong things. It's also wrong on the fundamental point that it's based on a false premise. It's based on the idea that the unvaccinated are a danger to the vaccinated. And of course that's entirely the wrong way round. Just because you're vaccinated doesn't mean that you don't carry the virus anymore or can't be exposed to the virus. All it means is that you won't be affected by the virus, but you'll still carry it, still pick it up, still pass it around to other people. And the only people who are in danger are those people who haven't been vaccinated for whatever reason. And it's the unvaccinated, therefore, who are in danger from the vaccinated, not the other way round. The vaccinated are safe because they've been vaccinated. So it's based on that false premise, and the idea that we must exclude the unvaccinated because they're a danger is the wrong way round. It's the vaccinated who are the danger to the unvaccinated. And therefore, one can't help but understand that there's something very odd about this position whereby you demonize those who are the most vulnerable. I remember growing up as a child and watching lots of movies in this country, and I would watch old movies, old black and white movies like Casablanca, Night Train to Munich, movies like that. They were set in wartime. And it was very common then in those kind of societies to be asked, where are your papers? You can't move forward freely, and any time a police officer or some official of the state could ask you to produce your papers. Always in these films, these people looked rather nervous and unhappy to be producing their papers. They might find something wrong with them. They might find that there's some irregularity, and they'd be stopped from going about their business. They'd be hauled down into a jail or a prison or something, or they'd be interrogated. And they were visibly upset and concerned, sometimes sweating because of the way in which their papers were being regarded with great scrutiny. And I was very glad, even as a child, that I didn't live in a country like that. I was pleased that we lived in what I would have thought of as a free country, where people had rights to go about their own business without having to show their papers, without having to give account to authority, without having to kowtow to some government official who had the right to take away all your rights with a glance or at the wrong papers. We're in danger of losing those freedoms. We're in danger of losing the idea of being a free society. We're also in danger of understanding that we never had those rights in the first place, and they're not ours, never were ours, but they were the state's to give to us or take away as the state chose, as the state pleased. That's not the kind of country which I wanted to live in, even as a child. It's not the kind of country I want to live in now. And it's not the kind of society that I believe in, where the state has the power over your life to determine whether you can have a cup of coffee or not, or whether you can go to a shop or not, or whether you can go to a football match or not. And even if you've been vaccinated, whether you haven't been vaccinated. I think that's beside the point here. What is the point is, does the state have that kind of power over your life, or doesn't it? Well, in the kind of society I want to live in, it shouldn't have anything like that kind of power.